SilverName versus Casie gonna start things off with a Priest Mirror, and with a best of 5 enabled here in Shield Phase Conquest, we're probably gonna see some Priest action today. I think a lot of players, when they look at how their strategy evolves from a best of 3 to a best of 5, the question does end up becoming, how will your strategy shift, if at all? And I think with the 4th decks being a very popular mix here, Warlock, Warrior, Paladin, Hunter, those are the X factors, because we all know how good Priest, Druid, and Shaman are.
Yes.
It's about the rest of those decks and how they throw a dynamic. Are they worth of being banned? Or perhaps are they even worth being protected to ensure that that is your influential edge in this matchup?
It's certainly going to depend on a series-by-series basis, right? Because if you look at it in that sense in this series, if you look at what the 4th decks, the X factors are, it's Zoo on SilverName's side going up against this Control N'Zoth Warrior on Casie's side. So the way those two decks directly interact, line up 1-to-1, SilverName is unfavored in that exchange. You would imagine that the Warrior with the N'Zoth package is going to be pretty effective in taking down the Warrior in that. Sorry, the Warrior is going to be very effective in taking down the Zoo in that spot. So if it just comes down to that one difference, so Casie is going to be favored. So SilverName has to find something different to do in terms of perhaps winning mirrors like this opening Priest mirror in order to give himself an advantage.
SilverName, the only player in this top 4 across all 3 regions to not have any kind of Shaman in his lineup. That is a risk in itself, given that Shaman is, I believe, the 2nd most popular deck, or class rather, to be brought this weekend. A lot of people have been raving about the Desert Hair Evolve package, and SilverName choosing to, well, actually, hold on. It says that Shaman's banned.
Yes. SilverName does have a Shaman. It's just been banned out of this series.
Oh.
Not sure what data you're looking at.
I don't know why.
SilverName has Priest, Warlock, Druid, Shaman.
Oh, I guess I wrote down Paladin instead of Shaman by accident. In that case, no, he did bring a Shaman.
Just end up being a double Shaman ban in this series, which I think is smart on both parts, because I think just in terms of raw power level, I think Priest is the most powerful deck still in the metagame, as we're starting to see Grandmasters play really replace, the opening ladder skirmishes as this expansion has come out. And then beyond that, I think Shaman is just still spiking as like the next most powerful deck in the metagame. Both of these players, by the way, even though you're not going to see them, are choosing to go with the quest variation of the new Evolved Shaman, neither of them favoring the token version, but either way, not going to be seen in the series because it is banned from both sides.
All right, well, when we go into this first Priest Mirror, whoever goes first and is able to wrestle control away from their opponent is going to be in a really powerful position. Casie has some of these tempo cards, and SilverName has the Northshire Clerics, but Northshire Cleric and Light Warden battles tend to be pretty one-sided.
They do, yeah. It's quite often a situation where the person with the Light Warden can choose to give the opponent one card for the sake of just taking massive tempo on the board, which is usually worth it in this matchup. But still, the fact that SilverName has 2 Clerics and has buffs in hand, like Power Word Shield, is going to make this more difficult for Casie. The fact that he is playing Light Warden here instead of his own Northshire Cleric is very relevant as well, because he did draw the Inner Fire, which is the very best tempo card in the matchup if you already have the minions available. Only making Light Warden a 2-attack minion immediately as opposed to a 3-attack minion would be very relevant if it was just a Cleric here coming down in response for SilverName.
So SilverName does have opportunities to draw those cards and try to fight back, but again, at what risk or what cost does he ends up buffing this Light Warden to the point where it's a little bit out of control?
Right. Yeah, if he just takes a turn here to draw cards and do nothing else, then he is essentially just going to concede the board to Casie's side without Casie really having to play any more additional cards to achieve that, which is definitely not something you want to be doing in the Priest Mirror. It's a very, very different matchup from just about every other Priest matchup in the game, because you are just not consistently ahead on turn 1s through 2 by having all of the highest quality 1-drops in the game available to you.
Is someone injured?
SilverName extending onto the board just to play this Northshire Cleric, hoping that Casie doesn't have extra arms or other ways to really capitalize and punish off of this. Casie does have Beaming Sidekick and Inner Fire.
I think, yeah, I was about to say, it feels bad, but I think you give your opponent 2 cards here. This is exactly the situation I was talking about on turn 1, where you will happily concede cards to the opponent in order to gain tempo, and this is an insane amount of tempo here for Casie. The 2 clerics do punish him a little bit, but the play is just too strong to be able to kill both clerics in one turn there.
Yeah, he does have his own Northshire Cleric to even refill his hand just a little bit.
Right.
You know, in this matchup, a lot of times we do actually end up seeing one player die with what feels like a full hand because they end up having the card draw pan out instead of the tempo early game. And now SilverName has to go with his own tempo with Injured Tolger hitting the board.
I got you, friend.
Beaming Sidekick. I think had SilverName known that he would have been able to pick up Silence off the Northshire Cleric draw, would have made his previous turn much easier. Northshire Cleric
Is someone injured?
for Casie. Ends up picking a Powered Shield and Beaming Sidekick, which is really nice to make sure that this Light Warden also stays alive.
Yep.
And the problems for SilverName continue.
Now you can see now, just because of how efficient that turn was in terms of tempo and in terms of trades from Casie, even though he gave those 2 extra card draws over to the opponent, the card advantage is now back in his favor. Like, he has 4 cards in play and 3 in hand, and SilverName just has 5 in hand and nothing in play. So it's well worth that situation where you draw your opponent's cards in the early game if you are going to gain tempo, which is exactly what Casie did.
Yeah, in this spot, Psychopomp has to revive that Injured Tolver. Gets it. Pretty important moment here for SilverName, at least just not to fall too far behind. A Silence. Not that Casie even really needed it, but very nice to pick up.
Just making sure he keeps his house in order, drawing cards before he makes any significant decisions that might change based on his draw. Now I'd imagine with that second Inner Fire in hand, this Beaming Sidekick is kind of interested in going on one of the lower attack minions.
Yeah.
I've got more left in me.
It's unlikely his board's going to fall apart through a Wild Pyromancer. Right, 1 Power Word Shield's already used. SilverName's just going to concede, not going to play it out. Game number 1 over to Casie. And with each victory comes 1 step closer to achieving their goal of going to the global finals. Earlier today, we saw Tom60229 book his ticket, get his 3rd effective World Championship or year-end championship throughout the Hearthstone World Championship, HCT, and now Hearthstone Grandmasters. Who's going to join him? Casie or SilverName, or perhaps Jarla Hunter Ace? Starting off with this Priest Mirror win, I feel like is something that we might be seeing a lot, right? Having the Priest be queued first, given that it feels like in this best of 5, what you want to really do prioritizing with your Protect is what is the best deck against the field, or in this case, your opponent's lineup.
Right.
And Priest seems to be a very common theme across all of them, even if there are specific decks targeting it.
Yeah, and it'll be interesting to see as well. Like, I don't know if this is the case, whether anyone really catered their lineup a little bit towards the potential for playing best of 5 later on if they got through to the playoff position, because obviously they have to play the same lineup that they submitted for the best of 3 games as they do for the best of 5. So if they're willing to do that, you can actually go for a slightly more like traditional conquest strategy, right? Of actually targeting one of the decks that your opponent is going to be expected to play. Most likely Druid or Shaman in that situation, because I think doing it to Priest would be too hard to do, regardless of how, protecting, how people will tend to protect it in every series. I don't know if that's the case, but it's certainly if someone took that risk and got to this point, then they're certainly in an advantageous position. But just looking through all the lineups that got here, I think they were just fairly standard, best of 3 Shield Phase Conquest looking lineups going into this tournament.
I mean, that could potentially have been part of Tom's strategy, who decided to omit Druid, play OTK Paladin and Zoo Warlock. So, when you have all these decks that you have to bring to a tournament, there's going to be like 1 or 2 decks that Priest is good against. It's really hard to avoid that. So I feel like rather than going against the grain, even in the most unfavorable matchup, Priest can still sneak a way through. I like the beat the Druid, beat the Warrior strategies. Although SilverName going up against a 1 Warrior player does make me a little bit more worried for his Zoo Warlock.
Yes.
So You know, SilverName really needs to get this Malagos Quest Druid through. And it seems like he's going to be queuing at game number 2. That leaves Casie with his own Druid or his Shaman, which I think you can argue both ways that it could be a tough matchup here for SilverName.
No, Casie Shaman is banned from the series. It's, it's
sorry.
Warrior or Druid
Warrior
to choose from. Yeah.
In that case, much better against Warrior.
Yep, Malagos Druid it's one of the big reasons you bring it. It's why Casie has gone with that Baleful Banker Elise strategy, him and Bunny Hopper, because they want a way to be guaranteed against Warrior. They were clearly expecting a little bit more Warrior in this tournament than they ended up running into. But
must be
SilverName has gone for the more traditional strategy of being incredibly consistent against Warrior, which is playing that Malagos package at the top end. But that does open you up to a few more inconsistent draws. So Casie on the more traditional Quest Druid with just that one added weird card in the Baleful Banker, which is in itself at least a minion that you can play in the early game. He'll be looking to be the player that has the consistent draws and is playing the aggressor in this matchup.
Yeah, given enough time, SilverName will be able to pretty much kill Casie. Although, we have seen Kun the Forgotten King loops, which may make it difficult for SilverName to part ways with certain resources. We've been seeing Druids even throw like one Moonfire away, because it's still enough, you know? And, and against a deck that can gain copious amounts of armor, feels like it might be an important factor to hold on to those resources.
That card in hand right now, Libidinous Floop, is also a huge factor when you play Malagos Druid against any class with armor. The most consistent setup that you can have in order to get massive damage is to go Dream Petal Florist and then innovate the Libidinous Floop. Unless, of course, you've Geppetto'd a 1-mana Malagos or whatever, and then you're chilling. You can do whatever you want. But if you need to make something happen, you have Elise and Mali in hand, and then you Dream Petal, you innovate, you Floop. And then you are guaranteed to at least hit 1 discount on each, or completely discount your Malagos to 0. And either of those scenarios give you 1,000,000 damage of burst if you've held on to all of your burn cards. If they don't do that, the damage can be limited, or you have to take some kind of 50-50, where your Dream Petal could hit your Floop or could hit your Malagos, and then you can waste a turn. That is the guaranteed setup that you will generally want to go for in most matchups against armor game decks.
Both players having a early game stall just to finish the quest. I don't really expect too much out of SilverName in terms of his early game plays, given that he's very clearly just trying to set up the Oasis Surger curve. And then in Casey's side, Ferocious Howl here could end up being an important card to use later on. So he's gonna at least consider the possibility of holding it before he pulls the trigger here.
Yeah, I think with Nourish in hand, maybe he can afford to be a little greedier with that Ferocious Howl and try and get maximum value out of it.
Right. I mean, he does technically gain armor too, a little bit by hero powering, but it's not the kind of armor that I think makes the big difference compared to, say, Holy Wrath Paladin, which pretty much caps somewhere between 25 and like the low 30s.
Right.
The damage range of the Malagos Druid could range from 12 to what feels like 100,000 damage. I don't mind using Ferocious Howl. I think part of the matchup is being able to have a hand that threatens. And right now, Casie does have the Nourish, and he might run into hand space issues, which we've seen a handful of Grandmasters experience in matchups like this before.
That is true.
And I don't think the Ferocious Howl game plan is something that's very reliable either, quite frankly.
By the Ferocious Howl game plan, you mean
trying to like armor outside the range of the opponent?
Sure. Like I don't know how much like adding Kun to the deck has changed that. I imagine it's certainly slightly more sustainable to try and get huge armor totals to get out of range.
I guess my logic is that people usually try to fight against combo decks by bursting their armor, and I don't think you can Ferocious Howl burst enough. But it could be wrong because you do have Kun to help refresh your mana crystals, so you can cast 2 more Howls or even more.
Right.
So I guess that's one of the things where I haven't explored this late game matchup enough yet, right? I've only seen the normal permutation of playing 1 Kun and then tempoing and trying to pressure them out of the game.
Right. But I think what can also be a factor in this particular matchup is just racing to the bottom of the deck, which is where playing the Ferocious Howl as efficiently as possible can also be a big deal. Because if Casie can get to the bottom of his deck before SilverName can, suddenly he might have this couple of free turns that while SilverName is setting up his couple of turns that he needs to set up his perfect hand for his Malagos burst, Casie is doing reps of his Elise Banker loop and generating a bunch of Kuns in his hand, at which point he can gain 40, 50, 60 armor and the game's over, right? So I think racing to the bottom of the deck is also a really big talking point in this matchup, which would present the argument of just play the card draw as efficiently as you can in the situation.
Right. Alright, so Casie just fighting back with the Oasis Surgers on board. Baleful Banker just to get a little bit extra tempo. Interesting application of it.
Very, very interesting. So that does seem to indicate that Casie is most interested in just concede from SilverName here.
So I'm being told that SilverName apparently queued the wrong deck.
Oh.
If that's the case.
I
okay, so
see.
if we look at the deck list, we were just told by producer, Worthy Expedition is not in SilverName's original deck.
Okay. When I heard wrong deck, I was like, well, hang on. He has a Druid in his lineup. It wasn't banned. It's perfectly fine for him to queue it there. But yes,
Malagos Druid.
I think, you guys could see, we weren't clear what was going on, so we weren't addressing it, that there was some typing going back and forth between the players. It appeared there, and it did start now rewinding it in my mind when SilverName fired off that Worthy Expedition. And yes, checking my reference and checking what you now have on the screen, you can see that there is no Worthy Expedition in that deck from SilverName. So we will await what the admin ruling is on the situation. But I believe that is just the fault of SilverName in this situation.
It probably is, given that the likelihood is that it could be the old Malagos list that didn't put an Emperor Thorsan in.
Right.
And usually it's like a 1-to-1. Oftentimes you see them have a one of Worthy Expedition in the past.
Yeah, or just a different version of the deck that he was trying out on ladder last night, and he just clicked the wrong one going into this. Like it can happen, but I do believe the responsibility is on the player to make sure that they're queuing the right deck in the situation.
Well, it is interesting given that they are playing on tournament accounts. So.
Oh, that's true. Yeah. So
my anticipation is that SilverName was playing an old Malagos deck list, and then I think maybe I can look at previous weeks where he did bring Malagos Druid.
Yeah, an unfortunate situation to come up in our first match of the day for sure. Regardless of what the ruling will be, we don't want to see games end like that. We want to see players outplay each other and get a point to demonstrate their deck building and their skill, and maybe even get lucky here and there in true Hearthstone fashion. But yeah, we've just had it confirmed to us that it is in fact a game loss for SilverName, which means that Casie will go to 2-0 up in the series. I'm not sure where exactly we stand in terms of Conquest ruling, because Conquest ruling says that each class has to win, but I would presume that now means that Casie's Druid has won in the series as well.
It would mean that that Druid deck has lost in that game based off the concession, and then Casie will get the auto win with the Druid. That's a really big deal. Specifically, SilverName wanted that Zoo Warlock to hit that Druid, and now his Zoo Warlock needs to get past this Warrior, and Warrior can struggle. But I gotta say that Warrior losing 3 times, especially to a deck that it is designed to beat, honestly, with the Warpaths and the Death Rattles and all these other things that put walls up and Zoo Warlock can't finish the game. This is looking very hard for SilverName.
So SilverName now has to win with Priest against Warrior in what some people erroneously thought was an already favored matchup for Warrior before the expansion. But now this Warrior for Casie it's very close to the version of Warrior that you could have argued was favored against Priest previously, because it has 2 Brawls, it has 2 Plague of Wrath, it has 2 Warpath, it has a Whirlwind as an activator, it has everything that you need to be able to take care of Priest boards, but then it also plays Kartut Defender and N'Zoth for the ultimate you can never kill me again in this game play. That just locks Priest out of the game. So if anything, this is probably improved against Priest. Yeah. It's then, SilverName then has to win with a Zoo against a Control Warrior, which is classically a favored matchup. The only good matchup he has left is that hopefully now correct version of Malagos Druid that he'll be able to queue into the Warrior.
Right. I personally am a bigger fan of this package than, say, the Frightened Flunky Armegadillo and Tomb Warden package.
Okay.
largely because I feel like Warrior's at its best when it can kind of pick its specific removal, and also time when it can start taking back the board. It felt like with Frightened Flunking or Megadillo and Tumorn, you were often forced to just kind of throw it out onto the board. And you didn't really get to do a very Control Warrior-esque thing, which is not do anything. Instead, you're often playing these proactive things to try and get ahead of your opponent. And it kind of led to some conflicting things, where like Frightened Flunking or Megadillo, whatnot, made you like off to the head on the board, and then you have Brawl and Warpath.
Right.
This always feels like with Cartoon Defender Nazad, they can just keep doing the Control Warrior thing.
Yes, that is very fair. SilverName, though, here does find a Crystal Merchant in the early game, which is huge for him. No answer for it yet for Casie. He's just going to choose to match it with his own card draw. But this is basically just a Nourish matchup for SilverName. If he can find the card Nourish in a timely fashion, he is going to be immensely favored. If those two Nourish are in the bottom 6, bottom 8 cards of his deck, those are the games where Casie is going to have an actual opportunity to come back into this.
SilverName needs to win this. It's single elimination in the top 4. I think the webcam perhaps reflective of the level of focus going on in his head right now is fading a little bit.
So
we're still there.
Fuzzy is what you're saying. Yeah, but you know, as a serious point, I really hope that these players are not affected too much by the situation that occurred in the last game. Obviously, it will play some effect, probably more so on SilverName than Casie. But, you know, I know Casie has had this situation come up before where he's really very much considered not taking a win against Fino in a situation where he felt like Fino might have been hard done by. But, you know, he's just got to do what he's got to do. He's a very proud competitor, is Casie. I'm sure SilverName is as well. They've just got to try and get their head down and continue what's in front of them.
Yeah, I think the most important thing when it comes down to situations like this is understanding what's within your control. And I think a lot of times competitors, they're very quick to try and prove how like that they didn't win illegitimately. And I don't think anyone will doubt whether or not Casie wins the series. He is a worthy winner, but I have to imagine it's a bittersweet taste.
Yes.
Now back into the game here, SilverName has the Geppetto and Malygos in hand, so that's something that I don't think he was hoping to see. But he still can have things like a 1-mana Elise or 1-mana Coon that would still open up his combos like mad. So I don't think it's necessarily the end of the world just because the Malygos and Geppetto are in hand early.
Right. What is a huge deal, though, is he has now hit 6 mana and there is no Nourish in sight. And what continues to be a big deal is that he's losing the board and losing tempo right now to this Control Warrior. That's the nightmare scenario. There's two things that Warrior's going to try and do. It's, you know, at least pay lip service to the idea of pressuring down the Druid, so it can try and make them a little bit panicky, try and make them use some of their spells as removal. And if they can't do that, then they just have to try and sit back and settle into a control situation and hope that the Nourishes don't come for the Druid in order to get to the bottom of their deck very quickly. In this case, Casey's got the good news that both of those things are a reality. He has legitimate pressure. He has the follow-up with Emperor coming up after this. And right now, SilverName does not have card draw to be able to keep cycling through his deck.
Yeah, I mean, Geppetto Joy Buzz is card draw. Starfall just to reduce the amount of pressure. Surely there's a better Emperor opportunity.
It does make me wonder, like, what exactly the Emperor's job in this deck is specifically for Malygos Druid. It does seem like there's a lot of redundant discount effects in this new build where the Emperor comes in. I made the comment yesterday, like, if you have the opportunity to Geppetto your Mali, to Dream Petal your Mali, to play an Emperor, like, do you really need it to cost minus 15 mana? Like, it does seem perhaps a little redundant. I do perhaps suspect that Emperor is being a little bit overplayed in the early days of the metagame just because the card's sweet and people want to play Emperor. Like, it's one of the coolest cards we've ever seen, in my opinion. But we kind of went through this pattern previously, right, where people started off playing it just in tempo decks as their 6-drop, and then that kind of stopped happening after a while, and it was more reserved for actual legitimate combo decks.
It's a fair point.
I'll make you a real toy.
Geppetto Joy Buzz pulls Crystal Merchant and Coon the Forgotten King to 1 mana.
1 mana, gain 10 mana seems very balanced.
Yeah, you know, I kind of wonder how that works too within itself. You kind of asked the Emperor Thorsan and Geppetto Joybuzz whether or not they can fit together if it's too much. I mean, even having Geppetto Joybuzz, I'm realizing pulling Emperor Thorsan.
Yep.
Put it into a 1 mana, huge discount on stuff. I'm just starting to realize that this deck has a lot of crazy possibilities. Because then, what if you don't have the Dream Petal Florist, but instead you play Emperor Thorsan for 1 mana, and then the Floop for 1 mana, they just count everything by 2, and it's like in these kinds of situations where it's like,
yeah, okay.
I feel like what Geppetto Joybuzz and Emperor Thorsan does is give you all the discounts, which is pretty fun to think about the possibilities.
Yep.
I wonder if that line has ever been taken yet. Either way, we can agree that SilverName just did not have the card draw. And now, with Elise being drawn, what other minions are even left in the deck for SilverName to even discount? I guess Geppetto Joybuzz would get a Dream Petal Florist.
Behold, jewels of the sun.
Another Nubisat Defender.
Yeah.
Oasis Surgers. These are not really cards that you want to be drawing.
Yeah, and I think like even with all the extra discount tools and whatever that you have in the deck, I still just don't think you can afford to play your Flute like that in this matchup. I think it just costs you so much potential damage to lose your Flute. Even if it doesn't cost you damage, it increases your failure rate of not getting the right setup where you don't then get that huge damage at the end of the game.
Your opponent also sees like, oh, no Floop, so I can just like half your damage.
Right.
What if? Now, Casie, like we kind of talked about, doing the Control Warrior thing. I really like holding on to the Sylvanas. Sylvanas does have an opportunity to really mess with the opponent a lot. If they're going for some kind of double swipe finish, Sylvanas could ruin that.
That is true.
That's what we've seen in the past with Malygos decks. Way back in the day, Sylvanas, a big disruption tool. I think that AoE the board.
All right. Finally hits his nourished as SilverName, but you are right, and I think it's a big difference with a deck that like Warrior that can gain armor, because we've seen it with, say, N'Zoth Priest on ladder, for example, where they play against a Malygos deck, and they're like, well, I have my huge N'Zoth board of 6 Kartut defenders on the board. It doesn't matter, because they're just going to Moonfire you first, and then swipe you, and then you die. Like, it's the same thing as the Mistress of Mixtures Hellfire interaction that we used to know, right? Like, if you go to 0, it doesn't matter if you then heal afterwards. But since Warrior can get way above that 30 mark, they can force the opponent to have to use 2 swipes to kill them in certain spots. And then the first one will end up killing a Sylvanas and potentially ruin the combo turn.
Time waits for no one.
SilverName really weighing what he wants to do with his 5 mana, or potentially 15 mana. But now has the ability to nourish for even more cards. Does not need that Innervate now that Kuhn is there. He can pretty much get everything he wants to do in a turn.
Right.
This is scary territory for Casie. Do you have the ability to go deep into the deck and survive a Malygos Burst combo? I don't think it's likely here.
No, I think SilverName will have to mess up from this position as far as I'm seeing it for Casie to have too much opportunity. Casie chooses to use Plague of Wrath there to gain 2 armor, essentially, is the only way I can think of looking at it. He did have 10 mana available, so he could have just 5 Warpaths on that turn to kill the 3/5s.
I think that's just to show you the amount of respect that he has for this inevitable Malygos Burst.
Right.
Elise is now active. I have half a mind from SilverName just to start dumping more stuff. Like Kuhn you don't really need, but being 0 mana is also just kind of this amazing tool to unlock Malygos damage.
Sure.
It's hard to part ways with it.
I have no time for games.
Job done.
Sylvanas for 5 mana. Sylvanas Brawl. Very powerful tool. Sylvanas survives. Although I guess that does give SilverName more opportunities just to use his mana and respond to it. Starfall, Oasis Surge number 2. So the Dream Petal Florist, if it hits Malygos, there's no way SilverName like ever loses.
Nope.
It's just way too much damage.
Correct.
I'm
And
so
you can still guarantee that happening at least once. Dream Petal Florist will essentially, it will never hit a 0-cost minion. So when I talk about Dream Petal Florist Innovate Floop, you can then have a situation where even if the first Dream Petal Florist hits the Elise, there will then be a 0-mana Elise and a 0-mana Kun in the hand. So neither of those are legal targets for the second Dream Petal Florist to then discount. So the second Florist will always discount the Malagos.
Well, it looks like Dream Petal Florist seems good to me here. I don't know if SilverName is contemplating another move instead, perhaps using his Hidden Oasis, but I feel like you can just Hidden Oasis Elise and then Kun everything.
Flower power!
Now, this is now the problem. With the Innovate not being available for the standard setup, he has got to do something different here with this new build, because he can't play Kun to refresh his mana and then still get the second copy of the Floop on board. And there you see, this has cost him a turn, because now his Dream Petal Florist hit his Floop, so he now has to play another Flooped Dream Petal Florist to try and discount his Malagos.
Does he, though? He does have a 0-mana Kun, which allows him to play the second Malagos and then go off.
No, because then his Floop will be the Kun that he played and not the Malagos. Right?
Well, I'm saying that, so if he plays Elise, he will be able to play Malagos and then his Kun.
Oh, the copied Malagos. Sure. Yeah, gotcha.
But I mean, this also works too as a form of burst. With Blast Shield, no, Blast Shield still isn't enough to handle four Moonfires and 2 swipes.
Flower power!
Yeah, I like dumping the Hidden Oasis as well.
Yep. So now he can at least dupe the hand, play the Kun. There are no more minions in hand that cost more than 0, so this does actually continue to guarantee the setup on the Malagos.
Also,
Need a hand, Explorer?
both brawls were used.
Time waits for no
So
one.
now Kun unlocks it. In fact, I think somebody might. Does he have lethal? If he just like Kuns, Malagos, and then 4 Moonfires, it's 44.
Kun Mali 44. Yeah, I think he did.
All right. Just I think he almost was out of time.
Yep.
Figured out a little bit too late.
Yep. I mean, you know, in his defense, I was only fully getting to grips with all the Malagos Druid interactions in various matchups as we introduced this whole new factor of Kun and Emperor and everything else. So I'm certainly still a step behind on how the late game combos work with this Mali Druid.
Okay, so now you can play 6 spells with 2 Malagos.
He's like omni-dead. This damage is just going to delete Casie.
Goes into his collection, disenchants everything manually.
Yes, exactly.
Oh my gosh.
How much was it?
Still
6 spells at plus 10 is 60, and then the 2 swipes 68, 72.
Yeah, 72 damage. With opportunity to go more if he wanted to, plus the Elise stack on the board. Casie was giga dead. Yes, as all the cool kids call it. And SilverName with a victory, pulling a little bit closer to a comeback, but that was, in my opinion, the easiest part of this series. Malagos Druid versus the Warrior. Comes down to Zoo, Warlock, and Priest, 2 matchups on paper, which SilverName might struggle with.
Yes, pretty well navigated there towards the end from SilverName, recognizing that he still had this setup, which maybe was a turn slower, maybe wasn't, I'm not entirely sure, but recognizing that he can use the Kun to generate the space in hand, play the Elise, and still have enough mana to guarantee his discounted Malagos setup, which was very important in that situation, and then using the duplicated Kun to still be able to play his 8-mana Malagos alongside the discounted one and still have that massive burst turn. There is like 16 different routes that you can take through the late game now with that Malagos Druid. It's pretty crazy. It's certainly a high skill cap deck. I know Frozen has been a huge advocate for it in the past and been critical of some of the play that we've seen when the deck has maybe even been a step simpler than it is now with all these new cards coming in. So that deck is a wild one for sure, although now I guess it's a standard one and the cards from Wild coming back into play.
Nice wordplay there, Subtle. Well done. Going into
Thanks,
game number 4, Priest versus the Warrior. Well, no, you have a good point. I think with at least the Enlightened and Geppetto Joybuzz and now Emperor Thorstand, and even with other cards, like sometimes I think there might be room for Zephyrs to make its way back into the deck.
Whew!
There's some interesting combos that you can pull off with that deck, and it might be the hardest variant that we've seen of Malygos Druid yet.
Indeed. But as we were saying, that is a matchup that Casie was pretty much conceding. If there was a Malygos Druid coming up against him, it relies on his opponents making pretty catastrophic errors for him to get over the line, or him having the absolute nuts pressure draw into no nourish from the opponent, right? Like, those are the weird worlds that you've got to be in to win that matchup as the Warrior. These two matchups coming up now are much more comfortable for him. Priest was certainly what he expected, partly with this Warrior build coming in, and then the Zoo perhaps would have been more unexpected, but it's a nice circumstance for him. It's a nice accidental circumstance that he's run into a Zoo player here in a very important match.
Yeah. And that does make sense, right? With Casie protecting Priest and banning Shaman, incidentally making his Warrior much stronger in this series. And I think that's something that requires some people to really analyze the format even deeper than what we originally do. Some people might just analyze it as like, I'm going to pick the 4 best decks. Right? And if you do, you just want to protect the best deck that you want to play. So something that's really common would be Casie would protect his Priest and then ban a matchup that Priest is bad against. But, you know, if you anticipate SilverName to be also protecting his Priest, you would have to have a good game plan to follow up with it. So banning the Shaman makes sense.
Casie choosing to go Ziliax here over Dynomatic, and then as the turn progresses, you can start to understand why just a little bit, because you can see that Dynomatic becomes an incredibly powerful follow-up, and being able to add 5 damage to the board. Like, it's more tempo over 2 turns to do it this way, and with Dr. Boom in hand, his Dynomatic has even more upside later in the game. I think you can see here for SilverName that he is almost resigned at this point to not having much of an opportunity to come back into this. Priest does not play well from behind. It doesn't matter how ineffective the deck on the other side is supposed to be at generating pressure. If they just play their minions and you don't have any, Priest just does not have game against that.
Yeah, and it's hard to watch what's happening without realizing that Priest was supposed to try to beat the Druid from Casie, which had a high likelihood it would, and then would come down to whether or not the Zoo Warlock can beat the Druid. The entire crux of SilverName's strategy, targeting a popular deck that Casie did in fact bring. And it let it escape simply because he made a very common error that we do all too well in our own ladder sessions of playing the wrong version of the deck that we built 7 times in our deck collection.
Literally last night, I wanted to play just like the regular build of Flamewake Mage that people are using right now, and I accidentally queued a meme version that I was playing on day 1 that had Faceless Manipulator in it, so I could triple Flamewaker with Emperor. And that deck is trash, and I lost immediately. It happens. It's just really unfortunate to SilverName that it happened in such a high-profile situation. And as you said, it does feel like we've got a lot of the big talking point of the series taken away from us, because it was very much about that Druid from Casie and whether he could get a win. And also the matchup that we started to see was the big one where I think he had a really good shot of winning with that Druid as well. So it was the important one to like really see play out to its fullest. So immensely disappointing on all fronts. But of course, our concerns in just wanting to see the broadcast play out, like, they pale in comparison to how SilverName must be feeling right now.
Oh yeah. Work hard all season, make the redemption arc, win Sottle's very important most improved player.
Oh, of course, yeah. I'm sure that makes him feel so much better.
Wait, was there a lethal opportunity here for Casie? Did he just attack with Ziliax and then bounce Ziliax to the hand and then magnetize it to the 3/4?
No, he was still off, right? I think he was still a little bit off.
Okay. I'll take your word for it. I was realizing Youth for Brewmaster allowed him to have the magnetic. Oh, hold on. He's not dead yet.
Hold on a second. Hold on a second.
I mean, this is a board clear.
There's a board clear. does clear his own board as well, but we won't talk about that.
Yeah. Okay. Well, you heal the Pyromancer in this
Yeah.
situation, and then you silence. Okay. Needs his life total because Zap is legitimately threatening him.
Yeah, I mean, he's not wrong.
Ooh. Yeah. Cinematic again.
Light the fuses!
What?
Sick.
Okay, Casie, you didn't have to do it to him like that. Come on.
Failure is an option.
Wow. Failure was in fact an option, but apparently not for Casie.
It's a lot of card draw.
I got you, friend.
SilverName isn't dead.
He's not dead, but he's certainly on life support.
Yeah. And Casie here can just actually push damage. Keep SilverName in check. And with this, SilverName is on his last turn, unless he can find a way to bail himself out here with his Northshire Clerics. Can effectively draw almost his entire deck now.
Is someone
Yeah,
injured?
he does still have his injured Tolvirs remaining. He still, in fact, has almost all of his minions remaining. That's kind of been the problem for him this game, is that he just drew every spell in his deck in the early game. So he is able to potentially put up a wall to protect himself. Never mind. Okay, there it is, finally. Both injured Tolvirs, bottom 4 for SilverName.
Yeah, and with that, the Shield Slam is going to do it. SilverName is out. Casie moves on to the Grand Finals of Season 2 of Hearthstone Grandmasters for Europe. And will be representing himself, Team Complexity Germany, Soddle's Analysis, and Ego. You know, a job well done. Again, probably a bit bittersweet victory, given that I'm sure Casie would have liked to win it the hard way, but sometimes you gotta take the lemons that are given to you and make some lemonade.
Yeah, exactly. It's a heartbreaker of a series, but he had, like I said, he had a similar thing against Fino earlier in the season where, you know, Fino, due to maybe some lag issues or whatever, didn't complete a lethal. At the time, he was staring down relegation. Of course, he ended up losing his spot in Grandmasters. Casie came on interview afterwards and said, you know, I didn't know what to do. Like, I didn't want to win like that. And I had to remind him that, like, you know, this is very important for him as well. And sometimes in that position, you do just have to look out and say, you know, okay, I have to take this victory as it comes. Feel sympathy for my opponent, of course, but at the end of the day, I'm a professional. I've just got to take what's good for me.
And then there were 3. Casie is advancing to the Grand Finals, and he'll be joined by either Jarla or Hunter-Ace, both from Nordavind, one from Czech Republic and one from Norway. The reigning world champion is making a charge to try and get a spot in BlizzCon 2019. Will he be able to do it or be upset by fellow teammate and #1 seed Jarla? The answer is right after this break.